So y'all know I like to do the deep sea diving when I do my research. I like to go deep. I like to chew the cud. Like the buffalo, bison, cows, they chew their cud. You know, I love that concept. They eat their food, swallow it, regurgitate it, and then they chew it again to get all the nutrients out. Right? They want to make sure it's properly digested and get all the gems and the vitamins and minerals out of whatever they're eating. So I like that concept. I like the cows, you know, ruminants. I like that. They're called ruminants. I like that. I like to study something and then bring it back up into my consciousness and ruminate, chew on it, get every intellectual nutrient, vitamins and minerals that I can out of it. And what I've been talking with you guys recently about is cells. And specifically, I want to talk about a process of embryonic development that's called gastrulation. Gastrulation. Gastrulation is the very early stage of the embryonic development. And the reason I want to talk about that, because we have children, right? And if we have children, we need to be conscious of the earliest stages of their development, because those early stages it sets them on their course, right? It sets them on their journey. It's where they're establishing what they're going to be for the rest of their lives. They're sponges, they're absorbing everything. And why that's so important, because the cells, if we study embryonic development, the cells give us instructions on how we are to govern our children, even ourselves, right? Because some of us are grown-ass men, but yet we still kids. We behave like children, right? It's like evolution stopped at 21, 25, whatever the age we are, you know, 30. Our evolutionary process just kind of ended at whatever age it ended. It's never supposed to end. We're always supposed to keep growing and developing. So, but this particular research is very helpful if we have children. And here's why. Embryonic development, gastrulation, very early stage, right? All cells are practically at the same developmental and morphological level. They're all the same. So in terms of morphology, in terms of developmental, all cells are the same at the gastrulation phase. After gastrulation, we go into cell determination and cell differentiation. In a very simple definition or explanation, cell determination says you're going to be this to the cell, right? I'm talking in very simple terms. Cell determination says to the cell, you are going to be this. Cell differentiation says because you are going to be this, you're going to look like this. Hence the word differentiation. It differentiates the cell from all others. So cell determination says you're going to be the brain cell. Cell determination says you are determined to be the brain cell. Cell differentiation says, okay, now that we understand you're going to be the brain cell, we're going to make you look like the brain cell. So it starts to differentiate. Differentiate in biology, this is called morphogenesis, which means the beginning of the mold and the shape of the cell. Because differentiation now knows that the cell is determined. And when a cell is determined, that means its fate has been sealed. It's called cell fate. It's actually a part of biology. The fate of the cell is sealed. I'm sure you guys by now are starting to connect the dots, how this is important for us as organisms as well as our children. So once the fate of the cell has been sealed, differentiation says, okay, morphogenesis begins, which is another process. Morphogenesis, genesis means begin, right? We know Genesis means the very beginning. Morpho means to morph, means to turn to shape, take on a shape, mold, or form, structure. Morphogenesis says, okay, because you're going to be which is a part of differentiation, it's a mechanism. Because you're going to be the brain cell, what we're going to do is we're going to make you look like the brain cell. So you're going to have this shape. Okay, you're going to have this size, you're going to have this feature, you'll be identified as this, etc. So all the features are now, the features of the brain cells are now starting to be crystallized and manifested in the cell. So the cell now has its unique look, which is fitting for a brain cell, and so on and so forth. So if you're going to be a liver cell, okay, these are the features of the liver cell. If you're going to be a pancreas, whatever, any tissue that you've been designated to be, you're going to differentiate into. So now the question is this. So if we have children, you see how this, I'm sure you guys by now could draw the parallel, right? If you have children, right? If we have children and we're raising our children, before I say this, let me qualify this first. Let me go back a little bit. The question we got to ask ourselves, right? Here's a question that I ask myself as I research this. What and who is telling the cell what to be. Because when you study developmental biology, you come across this information that the cells are being told what to be. Hence the term determination. Once a cell is determined, it has been told what it's going to be. Then it becomes differentiated. So the question is, who and what are the mechanisms within the cell that is telling the cell what to do and what to be and how to be and etc. I came across the answer. The answer is the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is a gel-like fluid in which the cell resides. So it's the surrounding of the cell. It's the actual environment of the cell. And the cytoplasm has what's called mRNA, messenger RNA, proteins, amino acids, and various other elements. These are the elements. These elements. There's one word for that represents or categorizes all these different elements in the cytoplasm. That word is called morphogens. Morphogens are any substance or any factors or chemical signals that actually activates and deactivates genetic expression. So morphogens turn genes on, turn genes off, activates genes, deactivate genes. So it's a chemical signal that actually activates genes within the cell. So in activating and deactivating is the language that is conveyed. That's the activation and the deactivation and the suppressing and expressing is actually language. That would be considered cellular language. That's how the cells are communicating with the morphogens, which are the substance or the elements that activate and deactivate. So morphogen comes in and they say they latch onto what's called a cell receptor. Every cell has a receptor, and when the morphogen latches onto the cell receptor, it's actually communicating to the cell what genes are going to be on, what genes are going to be off, and what determines what genes are on and off is based off the localization of the cell. Localization of the cell means where the cell is localized within the embryo. So they're called determinants. Determinants, again, are all the things we just discussed, the proteins, the mRNAs, the RNAs. These are all the different elements that actually determine what the cell is going to be. So now, my friends, the question is, or not the question, but the answer, the consciousness, the awareness, the light, the come to Jesus moment that we should be all experiencing right now is that, okay, so our children are being determined by the environment that we have them in. We as adults. We as the adults are the determinants, right? In the cytoplasm, there are determinants, which are the elements that actually interact with the cell and tells the cell what it's going to be and how it's going to look. We as the adults in the room are the determinants, or we are, whether consciously or subconsciously, directly or indirectly, we are communicating to our children what they are going to be. Whether it's through our actions, words, or deeds, we are communicating to our children, who represents the cells, right? The embryonic cells, what they're going to be, because we are representative of we represent the determinants. So once a cell has been determined, it then differentiates. Once it differentiates, there is no going back. Once a cell is determined, it's irreversible. The fate, the fate of the cell is sealed. So once your child has been determined based off us being the determinants, they differentiate into who they're going to be at later stages in life. And it's irreversible. In terms of genetics, it's irreversible. Now, there's exceptions to rules. I'm sure people will say, well, just because a person is doing this, they can change. Everybody could change. That's a fact, right? Ice changes. I mean, you have 3 states, right? Liquid, gas, and solids, right? Water can turn into a solid and then go back to liquid, right? Depending on temperature, right? So, a solid can turn to gas and go back, right? Can liquefy, can change its state. So we understand that they are changing, there are different states and we can change our states. But the interesting thing is, because of Galileo's inertia, if you study inertia and understand that built into matter and into our DNA is a resistance to change, inherent resistance to change. This is why it's so hard for people to change, because on a in terms of physics, we are wired not to change. This is physics. If you study, you read Galileo thesis, you read dissertations by Newton and all these different philosophers and scientists, you'll see that we are as matter. Matter has a built-in mechanism to resist change. It's called inertia. But be that as it may, I don't want to digress too far off. The point is, when you understand how cells are fashioned and formed at these early stages, gastrulation, embryogenesis, morphogenesis, if you really understand that, you'll understand that to set your child future, to set your child on the path that will give them the most potential, it's called developmental potential, that will give them the most developmental potential to become successful in life, to become a fully evolutionized organism, a fully developed organism, and express their genes, express their true potential. We have to make sure that we understand what are the determinants that we have around our children, whether it's the TV shows they're watching, whether it's the books they're reading. Because look, not all reading is good reading, okay? You're reading nonsense, you put nonsense into your brain. You're gonna, if you put in nonsense, input, output, right? That's just a business. If you have a business background, you understand balance sheets, input and output, right? What you put in is what you're gonna get out. So reading is good, but make sure that they're reading something that's constructive and that's going to elevate and produce positive output, right? So if we really look into the cells and understand how cell differentiation, cell determination, and these different processes take place to ultimately remember, the ultimate purpose of the cell in embryonic development is to become what? You and I. Right? A mature, fully developed organism, right? So if there's one sampling error, then we have mutation, then there's all kind of craziness, right? So we got to make sure that our children are being properly surrounded and properly fed information from the environment that they're in so that they can become the best version of themselves. And the way that we really are to get this is to understand the microenvironment. The microenvironment being the biology, the microbiology, the cells, cell determination. These are microenvironments because we are operating on the macro sphere. The sphere that we operate on is the macro environment. But before we can really make this macro environment the best it can be, we have to study the microenvironment, right? It's common sense. You know, if you just bought, let's say, a new refrigerator, a 2018 refrigerator, it comes with a manual, right? Because these refrigerators nowadays, they got all kind of technology on them, right? Before you can understand how to use the technology on the refrigerator or your car or whatever it is, your cell phone, your brand new 2025 phone, right? Where, you know, some futuristic phone, you need to read the manual so that you can know how to operate that phone to get the maximum potential of that product. So it's the same concept. I'm trying to just illustrate it in a very simple way. If we're going to be able to really make our society better, politically, economically, sociologically, if we're going to make our society overall better, it is vitally important that we understand the microenvironment, which is the microorganisms. The microorganisms we are a derivative. That's all we are. We derive from the microenvironment, right? We all start out at micro levels. We're called gametes before we become zygotes. Before we become zygotes, we're called gametes. From zygotes to embryos, to fetus, to baby, to adults, etc. So to fully grasp how society as a civilization as a whole, as a community, as an ecosystem is to be functioned and to operate, it is vitally important that we study microbiology, microorganisms, because all of this is the microenvironment. And once we understand how the microenvironment operates, then we translate that or we transcribe that into our macro environment. And I can almost guarantee that our lives, not almost, they say there's no guarantees in life, but I beg to differ. There are guarantees. Death is a guarantee. That's one. But what I'm saying though is, be that as it may, if we can understand and really grasp the concepts, the principles, the practices, the mechanisms of microenvironment, right? Our micro environment, and translate that into our macro environment. I'm probably being a little bit idealistic here. I understand that. I'm probably being a little Pollyannish, because I know people are not gonna, this is not really something that we are going to do. I'm grounded in reality at the same time, the reality of what the world that I live in is, but doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Hope some of this was useful.